My name is Adam Jones. I own Pullman Marketing, and this is Alyssa, our brand strategist, and welcome to your weekly social. We're doing our best as marketers and as an agency to provide opportunities to learn, to grow, to see what's happening in the industry. There's a lot going on. There's two big things that we're going to talk about today. The first one being kind of some after effects, the ramifications of Facebook's privacy stuff against Facebook. But then also, Apple coming out and saying, we're going to scan all the things and full admittance at a back door. Usually, I'm like all for Apple and their privacy. Even back when there was, I don't know if you remember it.
Maybe.
There was a case in California, I want to say San Bernardino, where the FBI was asking Apple to unlock a phone.
Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar. I remember that.
Yeah. And I remember it's kind of not a big deal. It really isn't. Because Apple can do it. They said, even if we could, we're not necessarily going to.
Yeah.
Because then that creates precedent for the FBI to make as many requests as possible into any case filings, and it creates an undue burden on the company. There's all kinds of stuff. Back then, it's like, all right, privacy, go Apple. And then as marketers, we use Facebook for a lot of stuff, and now that we can't use data analytics from our Facebook advertising for Apple mobile users, that hurts us actively. Do you actually opt out of stuff on your Apple device, or because you have an Apple, right?
Yeah. So whenever I enter an app or anything, it'll usually say it'll give me the option to allow or not allow the app to track everything that I do. For smaller apps that I know I'm not really on, I just say no, don't track. But it's interesting because I don't actually know fully what that means for everything. Okay, because apps are going to do some tracking no matter what. So is it just no, they can't track everything you do, or is it there's
Right.
bigger things that it won't track, but all the little miscellaneous small things it'll still track a little bit, or are just things hidden, especially with Facebook, because Facebook with ads and everything like that thing. But for the social medias, I usually let it track because I work here and I know I know that we kind of need to track that stuff. And so for Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, I allowed the tracking.
We all work in social media, but we don't all see the exact same thing. So that's where I get educated in some of these parts. Are you okay that Apple is essentially saying, Facebook, you're not allowed to have this data, but we, Apple, in the long run, are probably going to be selling that data anyways?
Am I okay with it? I don't really know how I feel, but at the same time, just kind of growing up, I always knew that anything you put out on the internet is gonna be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that knowledge, I'm just like, okay, well, someone's gonna have it somewhere, whether it's Apple, whether it's Facebook, or some other even third party, which scares me to think about. So I just kind of go in with that knowledge of someone's gonna have it, someone's gonna track what I do, whether or not it's from the app itself or even Apple. And so I just kind of, I'm not too shocked. I just expect it to happen.
Right. And I think most of us are to a certain extent, we understand the moment we say, I agree and accept these conditions, you're probably taking data, but what do I have to hide? And see, that's where it gets interesting with Apple coming back and saying, we're going to begin scanning all of your iCloud stuff, and then in some cases, scanning your device.
Yeah.
Granted, for the use case that they're using, hey, I'm not trying to defend anything that's immoral or improper.
Yeah.
What I would argue is Google and Microsoft are already partnered in doing these types of scans. They actually have awesome technology that automatically do this. They also have partnerships. So then why does Apple need to do additional searches into a user's device?
In my mind, it's how well just all these different companies do and don't mesh with each other. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the primary things that especially for the iCloud part, right, is if people are uploading illegal content into their iCloud, it could be said that Apple could be liable. Which, I mean, that makes sense to me. Like, you do have to be careful. Even as a web host provider, we have to be careful with who we allow onto our systems.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. But then to regulate what an individual does with their device, that's where that gets a little bit creepy and weird to me. Because at that point, do you even own it? Right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I always run into the issue of like backing up my phone and everything like that because like I have an Apple, and so normally things would go into the iCloud, but one, we didn't pay for that. My dad's an Android user, so with all of my stuff being under him, like he uses Microsoft, and like we use Google Photos, for example, to back up all of our photos and things like that. And so he just set me up with an account since I have a Gmail, and we did it that way. And so all of my photos, which for me are some of the more important things on my phone, those are what get filtered in and backed up for sure. And that doesn't go to iCloud. Like, I don't really have anything in an iCloud unless I'm changing out my device when I may or may not have dropped my phone and then needed to get a new one. And so I went through the process of uploading it to all the data and everything onto iCloud just so I could make that transfer between phones. And then I deleted all of it and went on with my day and back to how I normally did things.
So really most users don't even have to touch iCloud for the most part.
Not if you don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't think.
So then how do you feel about Apple having that backdoor?
To know how much power and how much access everyone that works with Apple can like have that, like that's for me is a little like, oh, okay. But at the same time, I have nothing to hide, and I'm also just kind of like, I half expect it to happen.
Right.
And that's just something that's been engraved in my brain to just always be aware of.
The bigger question, as that kind of relates, is do you feel like there's been any bait and switch in advertising? Right? Because there was a big issue with Snapchat years ago where they're like, oh yeah, the photo's deleted. I think we all kind of knew that your photos weren't deleted. But there were still users and still backlash of like, oh no, this is operational, this is there. And there was even filed abuses of people. There's backdoors for Snapchat, if you didn't know, for police to be able to make access requests and to be able to find photos or things that may be related to a criminal case.
I did not know.
Yeah. And so there was a couple lawsuits because employees were actively abusing that and going in and looking at users' profiles and pictures that were deleted. But of course, were never. And so there were lawsuits based on that. Do you feel that there's any backlash or any like brand damage by Apple taking this?
I think there could be. I think there leaves potential for that in a lot of ways, especially and advertising on Snapchat's different. But even on Facebook with all the privacy settings changing everywhere, it does get harder to advertise for a brand because you want to stay within your brand's guidelines and make sure that everything you're doing is on brand. But at the same time, then you enter the different privacy settings that you need to be within so that you don't get your ad like marked and then you don't get a strike on Facebook, or even on TikTok. You don't get your video taken down on TikTok and then you get your account suspended for like 24 hours. And then if you get another strike, then it's even longer. And it can get to the point where you can't post videos anymore, even if what you're doing isn't necessarily bad, but it just violates these new upcoming privacy settings and other things that are coming up. So
yeah. And if you guys aren't aware, and we'll probably post more about this later, Google's implementing a new strike policy for pay-per-click advertising, which does include their YouTube ads as well. And so I could see some parts getting brute forced down in terms of the strike system. So a lot shifting, a lot changing. And actually, this might be a good spot to end today's talk.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot changing. And we do want to dive into that in the coming weeks. Anyways, enjoy the day.